The notification chimed at 3:17 a.m., cutting through the silence of my electronics shop like a rusty blade. I'd been hunched over a busted television for the past 4 hours, trying to coax life back into its circuits while my own marriage lay scattered in pieces around me. Find my phone. The alert read. Marta's device was pinging from an address I didn't recognize, some luxury lakeside location 40 minutes across town. According to her calendar, she should be wrapping up a late pitch meeting downtown. According to reality, my wife of 25 years was apparently somewhere else entirely. I set down my soldering iron and rubbed my eyes. The shop felt smaller at night, cramped with the detritus of other people's broken dreams. Televisions with cracked screens, laptops that wouldn't boot, gaming consoles that had given up the ghost, just like everything else in this Rust Belt city, including my marriage. Marta had been working late more often these past 6 months. Her advertising agency was landing bigger clients, she claimed, and success demanded sacrifice. I'd been proud of her, actually. While my little repair shop barely scraped by, she was climbing corporate ladders in her glass-walled office, networking with clients who drove cars worth more than my annual income. But 3 a.m. was late even for Marta. I grabbed my jacket and keys, leaving the broken television to its misery. The streets were empty except for a few delivery trucks and the occasional taxi ferrying home the last stragglers from downtown bars. My 15-year-old Honda coughed to life, protesting the cold February air. The lakeside address led me through increasingly upscale neighborhoods, past manicured lawns and houses that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. The GPS guided me to a modern glass and steel monstrosity perched on a hill overlooking the frozen lake. Even in the darkness, I could see it was the kind of place that screamed money and taste in equal measure. Marta's silver BMW sat in the circular driveway like it belonged there. I parked across the street, heart hammering against my ribs. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warm light spilled across what looked like a living room designed by someone who'd never worried about mortgage payments. And there, silhouetted against the glow, were 2 figures on a white leather couch. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. One was definitely Marta. I'd recognize her profile anywhere, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the gesture she made with her hands when she was animated about something. The other figure was a man I'd seen before at company parties. Damian something. Younger than me, better dressed, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having to fix other people's broken appliances to pay rent. They weren't discussing advertising strategies. Marta's hand rested on his thigh. He leaned in to whisper something that made her throw back her head and laugh. The same laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. A champagne bottle sat on the coffee table between them, 2 glasses catching the light. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I snapped photos through the window. The images were grainy, but clear enough. Clear enough to confirm what I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. My wife wasn't working late, she was working someone else. The rational part of my brain told me to drive home, confront her in the morning, handle this like adults. But rationality had apparently taken the night off. Instead, I found myself walking up the driveway toward Damian's pristine Tesla. The car key made a satisfying scraping sound along the passenger side door. I carved a message into the paint. Enjoy the ride, homewrecker. Then I knelt down and used my pocket knife to let the air out of the front tire, watching it deflate with a slow hiss. As I straightened up, I noticed the security camera mounted near the front door. Its red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Had I just documented my own stupidity? I was halfway back to my car when my phone buzzed with a text message. We need to talk. Now. The sender was Lana Morrison, Marta's best friend and the head of HR at her agency. Another message followed immediately. You want to play games, old man? I play dirtier. I stared at the screen, confusion mixing with dread. How could Lana possibly know what I'd just done? Unless... the security camera. She must have access to it somehow, which meant she was either watching me right now or had been alerted to my presence. I looked back at the house. The 2 figures on the couch hadn't moved, still lost in their intimate conversation, but somewhere in the shadows, Lana Morrison was pulling strings I couldn't see. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing faster than my old Honda's engine. 25 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Spying on my wife like some jealous teenager. Vandalizing cars, getting caught on camera by her manipulative friend. But as I pulled into my driveway and saw our darkened house, another emotion began to overtake the hurt and humiliation. Something colder, more focused. If they wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. The next evening, Marta came home with takeout from our favorite Italian place, a peace offering she didn't know she needed to make. She looked radiant, practically glowing with whatever satisfaction her secret life provided. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, despite supposedly spending 14 hours at the office. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, setting the bags on our kitchen counter. "The Morrison account is turning into a real challenge. We were at the office until almost midnight brainstorming solutions." I watched her unpack containers of pasta and breadsticks, marveling at how easily the lies flowed. The Morrison account. Even her deceptions were getting lazy. "Midnight, huh?" I kept my voice neutral. Must have been some brainstorming session. "You know how it is with creative work. Sometimes inspiration strikes at odd hours." She handed me a plate of linguine, the same dish we'd shared on our first date 26 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. We ate in relative silence, the television providing background noise that filled the spaces between our stilted conversation. Marta scrolled through her phone between bites, occasionally smiling at messages I wasn't allowed to see. "By the way," she said without looking up, "Lana mentioned she saw you downtown yesterday, near the Lakeside district. What were you doing over there?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, so it began. "Just checking out some competition," I said. "There's an electronics store over that way I'd heard about." "Really? I didn't know there were any shops in that area. It's mostly residential." Her tone was casual, but I caught the slight narrowing of her eyes. Maybe I got turned around. You know how I am with directions. She nodded, apparently satisfied with my bumbling husband act. It was a role I'd been playing for years without realizing it. The slightly incompetent small business owner who couldn't find his way out of a paper bag, let alone threaten her carefully constructed double life. The next morning brought a text from Damian himself. "Hey buddy, someone vandalized my car last night. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" LOL. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a punch. Buddy. As if we were friends. As if he wasn't sleeping with my wife while mocking me to my face. I showed up to Marta's office that afternoon with lunch, another attempt at normalcy that felt increasingly surreal. The advertising agency occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and modern furniture that looked uncomfortable but expensive. Damian was there, of course, leaning against Marta's desk in his perfectly tailored suit. He looked up when I entered, flashing that confident smile that probably worked wonders on clients and apparently on my wife. "Hey there, Jim. Good to see you." He extended his hand for a shake that lasted just a moment too long. "Marta was just telling me about your electronics business. Fascinating stuff." Fascinating in the way that roadside accidents were fascinating, his tone implied. "Jim brought lunch," Marta announced, though she didn't look particularly pleased about the interruption. "Wasn't that sweet?" "Very sweet," Damian agreed. "You're lucky to have such a thoughtful husband, Marta." The 3 of us stood there in a triangle of barely concealed tension, each playing our assigned roles. The devoted husband, the ambitious wife, the charming colleague who definitely wasn't sleeping with said wife. "I should get back to work," Damian said finally. "That Morrison presentation won't write itself." He touched Marta's shoulder as he passed, a gesture that could have been innocent if I hadn't seen them together the night before. After he left, Marta and I sat in her office picking at sandwiches neither of us really wanted. "Damian seems nice," I said. "He's very talented. The agency is lucky to have him." "I'm sure they are." She looked at me sharply, searching for hidden meaning in my words. But I kept my expression blank, channeling decades of customer service experience dealing with difficult clients. That evening, I made my first real move. I'd been thinking about it all day, weighing options and consequences. Marta was clearly planning to continue her affair while keeping me in the dark, probably until she figured out how to extract maximum advantage from our eventual divorce. Lana was somehow involved, though I wasn't sure how deeply. But I had advantages they didn't know about. 25 years of marriage meant I knew Marta's passwords, her habits, her weaknesses. More importantly, 20 years of running a small business had taught me things about people that corporate climbers never learned. How to read between the lines, how to find pressure points, how to make problems disappear. I started with her laptop. Marta was in the shower, singing some pop song she'd probably heard on the radio. I had maybe 10 minutes before she finished her elaborate beauty routine. Her MacBook was open on the kitchen counter, still logged into her email. The affair itself was disappointingly mundane. Lunch dates disguised as client meetings. Weekend conferences that were actually romantic getaways. Hotel receipts charged to her corporate credit card. Even their text messages were boring. Lots of heart emojis and can't wait to see you banalities. But buried in her sent folder, I found something more interesting. An email thread with Lana Morrison, dated 3 weeks ago. I think Jim suspects something. He's been asking questions about my schedule. Don't worry, I've been watching him. If he becomes a problem, I have ways to handle it. He'll never see us coming. Us? I whispered to myself. The shower was still running, Marta's voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. I scrolled through more emails, looking for context. There. Another thread, this one from 2 months ago. Lana, I'm not sure I can go through with this. Jim doesn't deserve this kind of betrayal. Remember what we talked about. He's holding you back, just like Robert held me back. Sometimes you have to take what you want. Damian is perfect for you. Young, successful, no baggage. Don't let guilt ruin your chance at happiness. Robert, Lana's ex-husband, who divorced her 5 years ago after discovering her affair with a junior executive. I'd been the one who'd accidentally let slip about Lana's indiscretions at a company party, not realizing the consequences. Robert had thanked me later, but Lana had never forgiven me. The pieces were starting to fit together. The shower stopped. I closed the laptop and retreated to the living room, my mind spinning with implications. Lana hadn't just encouraged Marta's affair. She'd orchestrated it. This wasn't about love or passion or even midlife crisis. This was revenge, served cold and calculated. My phone buzzed with another text from Lana. Enjoying your evening at home, Jim? I looked around our living room, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. The windows, the unlocked doors, the routine that anyone could observe and predict. She was watching. Had been watching, probably for months. I typed back, very much. Thanks for asking. A long pause, then, good. Keep it that way. The threat was clear, but so was the opportunity. Lana thought she was the puppet master, pulling strings from the shadows. But puppet masters had one fatal flaw. They never expected the puppets to cut their own strings. I smiled for the first time in days. If Lana Morrison wanted to play games, I'd show her how a small business owner dealt with hostile takeovers. My electronics shop had been hemorrhaging customers for 2 weeks. Regular clients who'd been coming to me for years suddenly found other places to get their repairs done. Mrs. Chen, who brought me her ancient television every few months, claimed she'd found someone cheaper across town. The Hendersons canceled their standing appointment for computer maintenance. Even teenagers stopped bringing me their gaming consoles. At first, I'd assumed it was just bad luck, the natural ebb and flow of small business. But when Tommy Rodriguez came in to pick up his laptop and casually mentioned that people were saying things about my work quality, I realized what was happening. Someone was systematically destroying my reputation. I confronted Frank about it at his boxing gym, the only place in town where I could think clearly. Frank Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, back when this city still had factories and hope. Now he ran a gym in a converted warehouse, training kids who had nowhere else to go and old-timers like me who needed to hit something. "It's that Morrison woman," Frank said, unwrapping his hands after a session with the heavy bag. "She's been making calls, spreading stories about botched repairs and overcharging. Real subtle stuff, the kind that spreads like wildfire in a town this size." "How do you know?" "Because she approached me too. Wanted to know if I'd heard any concerning stories about your business practices. Real innocent like, just a worried friend looking out for the community." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Lana wasn't just covering for Marta's affair. She was actively trying to ruin me, push me toward desperation, maybe force me to leave town entirely. "What did you tell her?" Frank grinned, showing teeth that had been rearranged by too many fights in his younger days. "I told her that Jim Patterson was the most honest mechanic in the city, and anyone saying different was probably trying to sell something." That evening, I decided to attend Marta's company party. She'd been discouraging me from these events for months, claiming they were boring networking affairs that would put me to sleep. Now I understood why. The party was held on the rooftop of downtown's fanciest hotel, with a view of the lake and the kind of open bar that made lawyers and advertising executives feel important. Marta looked stunning in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, probably purchased for someone else's appreciation. Damian held court near the bar, regaling a small crowd with some story that involved lots of hand gestures and knowing laughter. He wore success like an expensive cologne, obvious and slightly overwhelming. I nursed a whiskey and watched them work the room separately, careful not to appear too interested in each other. Professional, appropriate, giving nothing away to casual observers. They were good at this, but I was good at watching. Around 10 o'clock, Damian stepped out onto the balcony for what looked like a private phone call. I followed, bringing my drink and what I hoped looked like casual curiosity. "Great party," I said, joining him at the railing. He startled slightly, then recovered with that practiced smile. "Jim, I didn't expect to see you here. Marta said you usually skip these things." "I'm trying to be more supportive of her career. Marriage is about compromise, right?" Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at having to maintain the pretense. Absolutely. Marta's lucky to have such an understanding husband. Understanding. I let the word hang between us. That's one way to put it. We stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city lights reflected on the frozen lake. The same lake where his house sat, where I'd watched him put his hands on my wife. You know, I said conversationally, I was in your neighborhood the other night. Beautiful area. Those lakeside properties must cost a fortune. His knuckles went white around his drink glass. I wouldn't know. I just rent. Still, nice place for entertaining, very private. The mask slipped completely then. His smile became something sharp and ugly. Look, Jim, I don't know what you think you saw. I didn't say I saw anything. But you're walking on dangerous ground here. Some things are better left alone. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice, from one man to another. I finished my whiskey and set the empty glass on the balcony railing. You know what's funny about advice, Damian? The people who give it usually need it most. Then I accidentally bumped into him as I turned to leave, sending his drink cascading down the front of his $2,000 suit. Oops, I said. How clumsy of me. He lunged forward, grabbing my shirt. You piece of... I shoved him backward into a cocktail table, sending glasses crashing to the ground. The sound brought security running, along with half the party guests. Gentlemen, gentlemen, the hotel manager appeared like magic, flanked by two large men in cheap suits. Let's keep this civilized. Damian straightened his ruined jacket, trying to salvage some dignity. This man attacked me. I want him removed from the premises. Attacked? I looked around at the gathered crowd, many of whom had seen the whole exchange. I spilled a drink by accident. You're the one who grabbed me. Marta pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of mortification. Jim, what happened? Just a little misunderstanding, I said. Damian and I were discussing business ethics. The security guards escorted me to the elevator, but not before I caught Lana Morrison's expression across the room. She looked pleased, as if everything was going according to plan. Later that night, Marta confronted me in our bedroom. What was that about? She demanded. You embarrassed me in front of my entire company. Did I? Or did I just embarrass your boyfriend? The words hung between us like a loaded gun. For a moment, I thought she might confess everything, break down and beg forgiveness. Instead, she went on the attack. Boyfriend? Jim, you're being paranoid. Damian is a colleague, nothing more. Your jealousy is becoming a real problem. My jealousy. Yes, your jealousy. You've been acting strange for weeks. Following me, questioning my schedule, showing up at my office unannounced. It's not healthy. I stared at my wife of 25 years, marveling at her ability to rewrite reality. In her version of events, I was the problem. I was the one destroying our marriage with unfounded suspicions and irrational behavior. Maybe you're right, I said finally. Maybe I am being paranoid. She softened slightly, perhaps thinking she'd won. I know this is hard for you, with the business struggling and everything, but we'll get through it together. We always do. Together. While she planned her exit strategy with her lover and his friend, I let her think she'd convinced me, played the part of the chastened husband who'd seen the error of his ways. But as she drifted off to sleep beside me, I was planning my next move. If they wanted me to be paranoid, I'd show them what real paranoia looked like. I liquidated my business assets on a Tuesday morning, converting everything to cash through a series of transactions that would take weeks to trace. 20 years of accumulated inventory, tools, and equipment gone in a matter of hours to dealers who asked no questions and paid in untraceable bills. Marta had no idea. She'd left for work that morning with a kiss on my cheek and a reminder about dinner with her parents on Friday. Just another normal day in our increasingly abnormal marriage. The money gave me freedom, but more importantly, it gave me power. I started with the credit cards. As the primary account holder on our joint finances, I had every right to cancel them. Marta discovered this at lunch when her platinum card was declined at the upscale restaurant where she was meeting a client, who turned out to be Damian, according to the private investigator I'd hired. Her panicked phone call came 20 minutes later. Jim, there's something wrong with our credit cards. They're saying the accounts are closed. Really? That's strange. I'll look into it. Look into it? What do you mean, look into it? I'm sitting in Chez Laurent with a client and I can't pay for lunch. This is humiliating. I'm sure Damian won't mind picking up the tab. He seems like a generous guy. Silence. Then, how did you know I was with Damian? Lucky guess. I hung up and immediately called our bank, our mortgage company, and our insurance agent. By the end of the day, I'd frozen every joint account, canceled every shared policy, and transferred our assets to accounts that required both signatures to access. Marta came home that evening like a hurricane, slamming doors and demanding explanations. "What have you done?" she screamed. "I can't access any of our money." "Our money," I repeated calmly. "That's interesting phrasing, considering how you've been spending it lately." I showed her the credit card statements I'd been collecting, hotel charges, expensive restaurants, weekend trips I'd never taken, the evidence of her affair, documented in neat columns of debits and interest charges. "You want to leave me for your boyfriend. That's your choice," I said, "but you're not taking half of everything I've worked for while you do it." She stared at the papers, her face cycling through emotions: shock, guilt, anger, calculation. "Jim, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how those charges to the Lakeside Inn are really business expenses." "You're right," she said finally. "I should have been honest with you from the beginning, but this marriage has been over for years. We both know it." It was almost a relief to hear her admit it. No more pretending, no more games. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It has been over for years. I just didn't realize you'd already moved on. Damian and I, it just happened. We didn't plan it. But Lana did." That stopped her cold. "What?" "Your best friend. The one who's been orchestrating this whole thing. Did you really think she was helping you out of the goodness of her heart?" I showed her the emails I'd copied from her laptop, the ones that revealed Lana's true motivations. Marta read them with growing horror. "She told me she was looking out for me," Marta whispered. "She said you were holding me back, that I deserved better. She was using you to get back at me, for her divorce, for Robert finding out about her affair." The pieces clicked into place behind Marta's eyes. She sank into a chair, looking suddenly older. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get to explain to your boss why you've been using company resources for personal entertainment. I sent him copies of all the receipts this afternoon." Her face went white. "You didn't." "I did, along with some interesting emails about expense account fraud and ethical violations. Turns out corporate executives take that kind of thing very seriously. Jim, please. My career? Your career is built on lies and stolen time, just like your relationship with Damian." I stood up, feeling strangely calm. "You want out of this marriage? Fine. But you're leaving with exactly what you brought into it? Nothing." That night, I drove to Damian's lakeside house. I'd been studying his routines for weeks, and I knew he worked late on Thursdays, usually not returning home until after midnight. Breaking in was easier than I'd expected. Rich people relied too heavily on technology and not enough on common sense. His smart lock was impressive, but it was still just a lock, and I'd learned a few things about bypassing security systems during my years fixing broken electronics. The house was exactly what I'd expected: minimalist furniture, expensive art, everything designed to impress rather than comfort. His pride and joy was a virtual reality setup in the basement, complete with motion sensors and haptic feedback systems that probably cost more than most people's cars. I destroyed it methodically, using a hammer I'd brought for the purpose. The screen shattered with satisfying crashes, the sensors crumpled under repeated blows. When I was finished, the basement looked like a technology graveyard. But I wasn't done. I'd brought a bag of craft glitter, the kind that gets into everything and never comes out. I scattered it throughout his house, paying special attention to his bedroom and bathroom. Every surface, every crevice, every piece of clothing in his walk-in closet. The message I left on his bathroom mirror was written in red lipstick: "Try cleaning up a million regrets, homewrecker." I was almost to my car when Lana Morrison stepped out of the shadows near his driveway. "Well, well," she said. "Look what we have here." She was dressed in dark clothing, like someone who'd been planning to do her own breaking and entering. The realization hit me like a slap. She'd been watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. "Hello, Lana. Lovely evening for a walk?" "Cut the act, Jim. I saw what you did in there. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, criminal mischief. That's serious jail time." "Is it? Or is it just a homeowner defending his property from an intruder?" She laughed. "You don't own this house." "No, but I own the mortgage on it. As of this afternoon, when Damian's credit application was mysteriously rejected and I bought the note from the bank. Funny how these things work out." Her smile faltered. "You're lying." I showed her the paperwork on my phone, the mortgage transfer documents, the new deed, the eviction notice I'd be serving in the morning. "Turns out Damian's been living beyond his means," I said. "All those expensive dinners and hotel rooms add up. His credit rating took quite a hit when I shared some information with the right people." "You can't do this." "I already did. And unless I'm mistaken, you're currently trespassing on my property." She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist. "I wouldn't," I said quietly. I have security cameras now, too. Wouldn't want to add assault to your list of problems. What problems? I smiled. Check your email when you get home, Lana. I think you'll find some interesting messages from your HR department. Something about inappropriate relationships with subordinates and misuse of company resources. Her face went pale in the moonlight. You see, I continued, I've been doing some research into your activities. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Expense account irregularities, preferential treatment for certain employees, using your position to gather personal information about company families. You have no proof. I have plenty of proof. Screenshots, email chains, witness statements from people you've harassed over the years. It's all very thorough. I released her wrist and stepped back. The thing about revenge, Lana, is that it requires patience. You've been playing the long game for 5 years, ever since your divorce. But you made one crucial mistake. What's that? You assumed I was too stupid to fight back. I walked to my car, leaving her standing in the driveway of a house that no longer belonged to her boyfriend's target. As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, frantically dialing her phone. Tomorrow would bring consequences for all of us. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The confrontation came sooner than I'd expected. I'd planned to let them stew for a few days, watch them scramble as their carefully constructed world collapsed around them. Instead, they came to me. It was Friday evening, and I was in my newly rented apartment, a modest place across town that suited my reduced circumstances and simplified life. I just opened a beer and settled in to watch the news when someone started pounding on my door. Marta stood in the hallway, flanked by Damian and Lana like some twisted version of an intervention. They all looked like they'd been through a blender. Marta's usual polish was replaced by frazzled desperation. Damian's confident smirk had become a grimace of barely controlled rage, and Lana looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," Marta announced, pushing past me into the apartment. "By all means, come in," I said. "Make yourselves at home." They arranged themselves in my small living room like a tribunal, all righteous indignation and wounded pride. "This has gone far enough, Jim," Lana began. "Your little revenge fantasy is hurting innocent people." "Innocent people?" I laughed. "That's rich, coming from you." "You've destroyed Damian's career," Marta said. "His company fired him this morning because of your lies." "My lies? Or his expense account fraud?" Damian finally spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You planted that evidence. Those receipts, those emails, you fabricated everything." "Did I? Or did I just shine a light on what was already there?" I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a folder I'd prepared for this moment. Inside were copies of everything: credit card statements, hotel receipts, email printouts, bank records, witness statements. "The beautiful thing about evidence," I said, "is that it tells a story, and your story is pretty clear. Company credit cards used for personal expenses, confidential client information shared with unauthorized parties, harassment of employees' family members." I handed the folder to Lana. "My personal favorite is the email where you discussed using HR resources to investigate my financial situation. Very professional?" She flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each revelation. "How did you get these?" "The same way you got information about me. The difference is, I didn't break any laws doing it." "You broke into my house," Damian snarled. "Your house? I think you mean my house. The one you're being evicted from tomorrow." "That's fraud. You can't just buy someone's mortgage." "Actually, I can. It's called a distressed asset purchase. Perfectly legal when the borrower defaults on payments." "I never defaulted." "You did when your credit rating tanked and the bank called in your loan early. Amazing how quickly these things can happen." Marta stood up abruptly. "Stop this, Jim. Just stop. You've made your point. You've hurt us all. What do you want?" "What do I want?" I considered the question seriously. "I want my wife back. The one I married 25 years ago, before she decided I wasn't good enough for her new life. I want my friend back. The one who used to care about something other than her own advancement. I want the man who's sleeping with my wife to show some shame instead of treating me like a joke." "But since none of that is possible," I continued, "I want you all to understand what it feels like to lose everything you care about." "We get it," Lana said desperately. "You're angry. You have every right to be, but this scorched earth approach isn't solving anything." "Isn't it? Damian's learned that actions have consequences. You've discovered that manipulation works both ways, and Marta's finally being honest about what she really wants." I turned to my wife. "You are filing for divorce, aren't you? Or were you planning to keep both lives running indefinitely?" I filed the papers this morning, she admitted quietly. Good. Then we're all on the same page. The prenup? Damian started. There is no prenup, I interrupted. But there is a postnup, signed 3 years ago when Marta wanted to refinance the house. Very specific language about infidelity and asset division. Marta's face crumpled. She'd forgotten about that document, signed during happier times when she'd trusted me to handle our financial planning. You'll get nothing, she whispered. I'll get exactly what I'm entitled to, which is everything, since you violated the terms of our agreement. This is insane, Lana exploded. You're destroying 3 lives over a marriage that was already over. 3 lives? I looked at each of them in turn. Damian will find another job, probably in another city where his reputation hasn't preceded him. You'll survive your HR investigation, though your advancement prospects are probably limited now. And Marta will start over, which is apparently what she wanted anyway. What about you? Marta asked. What do you get out of all this destruction? I thought about it seriously. What did I get? My business was gone, my marriage was over, my reputation in this town was probably ruined. I'd burned every bridge and salted the earth behind me. I get to stop pretending, I said finally. Stop pretending our marriage was working. Stop pretending I didn't know what you were doing. Stop pretending that people like you deserve my consideration. People like us? Damian's voice was dangerous. People who take what they want and expect everyone else to clean up the mess. People who think the rules don't apply to them. People who mistake kindness for weakness. I opened another beer and settled back into my chair. You came here looking for what? An apology? A promise to back down? Some kind of negotiated settlement? We came here to give you one last chance to be reasonable, Lana said. Reasonable. I tasted the word. You know what would have been reasonable? Marta asking for a divorce before she started her affair. You staying out of other people's marriages. Damian finding his own girlfriend instead of stealing mine. But reasonable went out the window months ago. Now we're in consequences territory. They left shortly after that, their united front crumbling as they realized I wasn't going to be intimidated or bargained with. Through my window, I watched them argue in the parking lot. 3 people who'd thought they were so much smarter than the small-town electronics repair guy. Tomorrow would bring the final act. The city's annual charity gala, where all the important people gathered to congratulate themselves on their success and generosity. Marta would be there representing her agency, assuming she still had a job. Lana would attend as head of HR if her investigation hadn't concluded by then. Damian might even show up, trying to salvage what remained of his professional network. I'd bought a ticket that afternoon. After all, I was still technically a member of this community, still entitled to participate in its social rituals. And I had one last story to tell. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, tables draped in white linen that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The city's annual charity gala was always an impressive display of wealth and social positioning, and this year was no exception. I'd rented a tuxedo for the occasion, something I hadn't done since my wedding. It felt appropriate somehow. Formal attire for a formal ending. Marta was there, of course, looking stunning in a silver dress that caught the light as she moved through the crowd. She was working the room with practiced efficiency, networking with clients and colleagues as if her world wasn't collapsing around her. Professional to the end. Lana held court near the bar, her usual confidence somewhat diminished but still intact. She'd survived her HR investigation, apparently, or at least hadn't been fired yet. She kept glancing around the room nervously, as if expecting security to escort her out at any moment. Damian had surprised me by showing up. He stood near the auction tables, examining donated items with the careful attention of someone who no longer had money to bid on them. His rental tuxedo wasn't quite the right size, and he kept tugging at the sleeves. I nursed a whiskey and watched them all pretend everything was normal. The same social dance they'd been performing for years, just with higher stakes now. Around 10 o'clock, the evening's program began. The mayor spoke about community values and shared prosperity. The charity director outlined their goals for the coming year. Various business leaders took turns at the podium, each trying to sound more philanthropic than the last. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies announced, we have a special presentation this evening from one of our longtime community members, Jim Patterson. I'd made the arrangement that afternoon, a substantial donation in exchange for a few minutes at the microphone. Money, it turned out, could buy almost anything, including the opportunity to address the city's elite. The walk to the podium felt like the longest journey of my life. Every step was measured, deliberate, carrying me toward a point of no return. Behind me, I could hear whispered conversations as people tried to figure out who I was and why I was speaking. I reached the microphone and looked out over the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back at me, some curious, some polite, some already bored and checking their phones. Near the back, I spotted Marta. She looked confused, probably wondering how I'd managed to get on the program. Lana stood beside her, both of them watching with growing alarm. "Good evening," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "For those who don't know me, I'm Jim Patterson. I've lived in this city for 30 years, run a small business here, paid my taxes, tried to be a good neighbor and citizen." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Tonight is about charity, about giving back to our community. And I want to share with you all a story about generosity, about people who gave freely of themselves, sometimes without even realizing it. I paused, letting the silence build. My wife, Marta Patterson, has been incredibly generous with her time lately, working late nights, weekend conferences, always putting her clients' needs first. She's here tonight, actually. Marta, would you wave to everyone? Spotlight swung toward the back of the room, finding Marta in the crowd. She raised her hand hesitantly, her face already flushing with embarrassment. Marta works at Morrison & Associates, one of our city's premier advertising agencies. She's been particularly dedicated to the Morrison account, staying late, taking long lunch meetings, even weekend retreats to ensure client satisfaction. The crowd was starting to sense something was wrong. Conversations died as people focused on my words. Of course, the Morrison account is actually Damian Morrison, a talented young consultant who's been very appreciative of Marta's personal attention to his needs. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. I could see people turning to look at Marta, then searching the crowd for Damian. "Damian's here tonight, too. Damian, why don't you stand up? Don't be shy." The spotlight found him near the auction tables, frozen like a deer in headlights. He remained seated, but everyone could see him now. Now, some of you might think this is just a private matter between husband and wife. But here's where it gets interesting for our community. You see, Marta's generous spirit extended to using company resources for these client meetings. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend trips, all charged to her corporate credit card. The murmur of conversation grew louder. I could see Marta pushing through the crowd toward the exit, but security guards had mysteriously appeared to block the doors. But the real hero of this story is Lana Morrison, head of HR at the agency and Marta's best friend. "Lana, stand up so everyone can see you." Lana remained frozen in place, her face pale under the harsh lights. Lana has been incredibly supportive of this relationship. In fact, she helped orchestrate it. You see, 5 years ago, I accidentally mentioned Lana's own extramarital activities at a company party, which led to her divorce. Tonight seemed like the perfect opportunity for her to return the favor. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of papers. I have here copies of emails, text messages, and financial records documenting this entire affair. The expense account fraud, the misuse of company resources, the systematic harassment of employees' family members. I've already shared copies with the appropriate authorities, but I thought you all deserved to know what kind of people you've been doing business with. The ballroom erupted in chaos. People were shouting, security guards were moving through the crowd, and somewhere in the back, I could hear Marta screaming my name. But I wasn't finished. "The beautiful thing about truth," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "is that it doesn't care about your reputation or your social standing or your carefully constructed image. It just is." I looked directly at Marta, who had stopped trying to leave and was staring at me with something that might have been respect mixed with horror. "You wanted a divorce, Marta? Congratulations. You'll be hearing from my lawyer on Monday. Lana, I hope the HR investigation goes well. And Damian, good luck finding new employment. I hear the job market is tough these days." I set the microphone back on its stand and walked off the stage. Behind me, the ballroom was in complete chaos. Security guards trying to restore order, guests demanding explanations, reporters who'd been covering the charity event suddenly realizing they had a much bigger story. I made it to the hotel lobby before Marta caught up with me. "Jim, wait." I turned to face my wife one last time. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of her secrets. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Destroying everything we built together?" "We didn't build anything together, Marta. I built a life, and you decided it wasn't good enough for you." "So you decided to humiliate me in front of the entire city?" "I decided to tell the truth. The humiliation is just a side effect." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some trace of the man she'd married. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said finally. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just stopped paying attention." I walked out into the cold February night, leaving behind the chaos I'd created and the life I'd systematically dismantled. Snow was beginning to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. My phone was buzzing with calls and text messages, reporters, lawyers, probably my kids wanting to know what the hell their father had just done. I turned it off and kept walking. Tomorrow would bring consequences I couldn't foresee. Legal challenges, social ostracism, the complete destruction of whatever reputation I'd built over 30 years in this city. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I lit a cigarette, a habit I'd given up years ago at Marta's insistence, and watched the snow fall on the empty streets. In the distance, I could hear sirens heading toward the hotel, probably called by someone who thought the evening's drama might turn violent. They were wrong about that. The violence was already over. What remained was just cleanup. I'd given them exactly what they'd asked for, a monster to blame for their own choices, and I hadn't even had to break the law to do it. Not bad for an underdog. The snow continued to fall as I disappeared into the night, leaving behind the ashes of a life that had never really been mine to begin with. Behind me, the Riverside Hotel glowed against the darkness, full of people who would spend years talking about the night Jim Patterson finally stopped pretending to be someone he wasn't. They wanted a legend? I gave them one they'd never forget.